Remember last fall when businesses were complaining that they just couldn't hire enough workers because millions of people were quitting their jobs in the Great Resignation or not returning to work after the pandemic, us lazy bums. It's as if that whole economic situation was the fault of working people. Well, now, just a couple of months later, it seems that we have too many working people, with former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers saying that unemployment may have to rise with millions of people losing their jobs to bring down inflation. The response to that from Robert Reich, a former labor secretary, is, quote, rubbish. He says using high unemployment to attack inflation is like reducing someone's fever by putting them in a freezer. It may work, but at a horrendous cost. American workers are not responsible for today's inflation. I'm like, do we need to say that? It's not my fault there's inflation. Robert Reich joins us now. He was the Secretary of Labor under President Clinton and is a professor of public policy at UC Berkeley. I have so many inside jokes with my friends about sort of like what I picture in my mind is like older white men smoking cigars, pontificating about economic policy without thinking about the impact on real workers. And that's actually where I want to start. I mean, why does it always seem that working people are to blame for our economic problems, but never those men that are in the room smoking their cigars? Like, why do we have to fix the economy they broke?
I think that you are putting your finger exactly on the problem. I mean, it's cultural. A lot of the people who are pontificating about the importance of raising unemployment to 10 million workers in order to fight inflation, they are not the ones who are going to be unemployed. And it's very, very easy to blame workers. The fact of the matter is that the working people of America are not to blame for this inflation. Corporations are sitting on record profits. I mean, the oil companies, the food companies, they're the ones who are actually pushing up prices when they don't have to. They have monopoly positions in many of these industries, and we should not be blaming workers. I mean, if anybody's to blame, it is these big corporations.
They're also blaming President Biden and Democrats for not doing more about these issues. I mean, help us understand how inflation is tied to the choices of these corporations as opposed to the choices of workers or even choices by the president.
Well, Zerlina, there are certain things that Congress and the president could do, at least theoretically. I mean, a windfall profits tax right now, where you have these companies that are making literally windfall profits. They are using the cover of inflation to justify their price increases. There's absolutely no reason why those price increases should be there. They ought to be taxed and rebated to consumers, or at the very least, get rid of the gas tax and both at the federal and the state level, and use the windfall profits tax to pay for what you're basically giving up in terms of the gas tax. There are many things that can be done. I think that putting the onus on workers is the last thing you want to do. Because also, one thing that we need to say is that high unemployment doesn't hit everybody equally. I mean, the lower income workers, disproportionately people of color and women, they are the ones who are the first to be fired when unemployment moves upward. The Fed can raise interest rates all at once, but that's what's going to happen. We are heading to a recession if it continues to try to fight inflation by raising interest rates.
So let's talk about the fact that more economists are using the R word to talk about our economic future. Is that going to happen? Are we going to head into a recession? If you think so, what is the cause of that?
Well, it's looking increasingly likely because as the Fed continues to raise interest rates to fight inflation, it is slowing the economy. And what we know from history, and the last time it did it at the rate and speed it is now doing it, was the early 1980s. What we know is that in the early 1980s, when the Fed increased interest rates by a huge amount very rapidly to fight inflation, it plunged the United States economy into a very deep recession. And so it's very easy for the Fed to overshoot Some people say, well, we have a soft landing, which means that you actually, the Fed raises interest rates, slows the economy, but not enough to bring us into a recession, enough to fight inflation. Well, it's very hard to do that because this is not a precise science. And the people who are going to be most hurt by a recession, again, who are going to be the first fired, they don't have very much political clout to stop politicians and indirectly the Fed from doing this.
Really important analysis, Robert Reich. It's always great to talk to you about these issues, and we love having you. Thank you so much again for being here. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.